There's a Victorian rule that, if followed today, would save you from years of humiliation, wasted energy, and emotional exhaustion. It's brutally simple, yet most people violate it every single day. The Victorians understood something about human nature that we've forgotten in our age of endless second chances and toxic positivity. They knew that dignity isn't just about how you present yourself. It's about how you allow others to treat you. And they had one rule that protected that dignity above all else. Never offer twice what has already been despised. Let me tell you why this might be the most powerful lesson you never learned. Picture this. London, 1873. A young woman receives a calling card from a gentleman she met at a ball. He's invited her to tea at his family's estate. She's excited, flattered even. But when the day arrives, he sends a note. Something came up. Business matters. He apologizes profusely and asks if they might reschedule for the following week. She agrees. The following week comes. Another note. This time a family obligation. He's terribly sorry. Could they try again? And here's where the story takes a turn that would shock most modern people. She doesn't respond. She doesn't offer a third date. She doesn't text him saying it's fine, no worries, let me know when you're free. She simply moves on. Because in Victorian society, this wasn't being petty or playing games. This was self-respect. This was understanding a fundamental truth about human behavior that we've somehow unlearned. When someone rejects your offer once, it might be circumstance. When they reject it twice, it's a choice. And the Victorians knew better than to humiliate themselves by offering a third time. Now, before you think this is just about dating or social invitations, let me stop you right there. This principle applies to every single area of your life. Your career, your friendships, your family dynamics. That business partner who keeps saying they'll invest but never follows through. That friend who cancels plans at the last minute, repeatedly. That family member who promises to change but never does. How many times have you offered your time, your energy, your resources, your very self to someone who has already shown you, not once but twice, that they don't value what you're offering? The Victorians had a word for this kind of behavior. Degrading. Not degrading to the person rejecting you. Degrading to yourself. Let me tell you about Lady Caroline Lamb. You might know her as Lord Byron's obsessed lover, the woman who famously said he was mad, bad, and dangerous to know. But what history often glosses over is how she destroyed her own reputation not by loving Byron, but by refusing to stop offering herself to a man who had publicly, repeatedly, and cruelly rejected her. She wrote him letters. Hundreds of them. She showed up at his residence uninvited. She sent him locks of her hair. She even disguised herself as a page boy to gain entry to his home. Byron didn't just reject her. He mocked her. He wrote poems satirizing her. He told his friends she was insane. And still she offered. Again and again and again. The result? She became a social pariah. Her husband left her. Her family distanced themselves. She died alone and disgraced, not because she loved unwisely, but because she refused to recognize rejection for what it was. Clear answer. The Victorians understood something we've forgotten in our culture of persistence and never giving up. There's a difference between perseverance and delusion. There's a difference between fighting for what you want and begging for scraps from someone who's already told you you're not wanted. And they built an entire social code around this principle because they understood the psychology behind it. When you offer something twice after it's been rejected, you're not being generous or forgiving or understanding. You're telling the other person that you don't value yourself enough to recognize their answer. You're training them to disrespect you. You're establishing a dynamic where they hold all the power and you'll accept whatever crumbs they choose to throw your way. Think about it from a purely psychological standpoint. When someone rejects your offer the first time and you accept it gracefully, you maintain your dignity. You show that you respect both their decision and your own worth. If circumstances genuinely change and they come back to you, that's different. They're the one making the effort. They're the one demonstrating that they've reconsidered. But when you offer again after being rejected, you've shifted the entire power dynamic. You've shown that you need them more than they need you. You've demonstrated that your offer wasn't valuable enough to be accepted the first time, and apparently it's still not valuable enough, but you're willing to degrade it further by offering it again anyway. This is basic human psychology. We value what is scarce. We dismiss what is freely available regardless of how we treat it. Let me give you a modern example. You're at work. You've developed an innovative idea for a project. You present it to your boss. They dismiss it. Maybe they don't say no directly. Maybe they say, "Interesting, let me think about it," and then nothing happens. Few weeks later you bring it up again. You've refined it, added more details, addressed potential concerns. They give you the same response. Non-committal. Vague. Ultimately a no. Now here's the question. Do you bring it up a third time? Most people would say yes. You should fight for your ideas. You should be persistent. You should never give up. And that's exactly how you end up being the person in the office who everyone knows will accept being dismissed. You become the one whose ideas can be stolen and repackaged by someone else because you've already established that you'll keep offering them up regardless of how they're received. The Victorian approach would be different. After the second rejection, you stop offering. You take that idea and you find someone who will value it. Another department. Another company. Or you file it away and work on it independently until you can present results rather than proposals. Because the moment you offer a third time, you've told your boss that you don't believe in your own idea enough to take it somewhere it will be appreciated. This principle is even more crucial in personal relationships. I'm not just talking about romantic relationships, though that's where it's most obvious. I'm talking about friendships, family dynamics, any relationship where there's an exchange of energy and effort. How many friendships have you watched deteriorate into one-sided affairs where one person is constantly reaching out, planning, trying to connect, while the other person is perpetually busy, distracted, unable to reciprocate? The person doing all the reaching out tells themselves they're being a good friend. They're being understanding. They know the other person is going through something. Maybe they're depressed. Maybe they're overwhelmed. Maybe they just need space. And all of that might be true. But here's what the Victorians knew. If someone wants you in their life, they will make room for you. If they don't, no amount of your effort will change that. And by continuing to offer your friendship, your time, your emotional energy to someone who has shown you repeatedly that they don't value it, you're not being kind. You're being a fool. There's a darker side to this too. One the Victorians were intimately familiar with, even if they didn't discuss it openly. When you repeatedly offer what has been despised, you make yourself a target. Not just for rejection but for exploitation. Because once someone realizes you'll keep coming back no matter how poorly they treat you, they learn they can take whatever they want from you without giving anything in return. They can use your resources, your connections, your labor, your emotional support, and never reciprocate, because you've shown them they don't have to. You'll offer again anyway. This is how abusive relationships function. This is how toxic work environments perpetuate. This is how family members manipulate each other for decades. The pattern is always the same. One person keeps offering. The other person keeps taking and rejecting simultaneously. And the person doing the offering tells themselves that this time will be different. This time they'll finally be appreciated. This time their effort will be recognized and rewarded. Never is. Let me tell you about a man named Charles Dickens. Yes, that Charles Dickens. Before he was famous, before he was wealthy, before he was one of the most celebrated authors in the English language, he was desperately in love with a woman named Maria Beadnell. She was the daughter of a banker. He was a nobody, a court reporter with literary ambitions. He pursued her relentlessly. He wrote her love letters. He attended social events just to see her. He made his feelings abundantly clear. And she rejected him. Not harshly, not cruelly, but clearly. She wasn't interested. So what did Dickens do? He offered again. He persisted for 4 years. 4 years of pursuing a woman who had made it clear she didn't want him. And when he finally accepted that she meant what she'd been telling him all along, when he finally stopped offering himself to someone who had despised that offer repeatedly, something interesting happened. He channeled all that energy, all that passion, all that desperate need for validation into his writing. And he became Charles Dickens. Years later, after he was famous, Maria reached out to him. She'd heard of his success. She wondered if they might reconnect. And Dickens, who by then had learned the lesson he should have learned years earlier, met with her once out of curiosity. He found her older, plainer, less impressive than he'd remembered. And he realized he'd wasted 4 years of his youth chasing someone who had never been worth the effort. He used that experience to create one of his most memorable characters, Flora Finching in Little Dorrit, a woman who represents the death of illusion, the reality of what happens when we finally see clearly what we once idealized. The lesson: those 4 years of repeatedly offering himself to someone who didn't want him weren't romantic. They weren't noble. They were wasted. And he knew it. So why do we do this? Why do we, in modern times, continue to offer and offer even after it's clear our offer isn't wanted? Part of it is cultural. We're told that persistence pays off. We're told never to give up on people we care about. We're told that if we just try hard enough, if we just prove ourselves enough, eventually we'll win over whoever we're pursuing. Whether that's a job, a relationship, a friendship, a family member's approval. We've romanticized the idea of never giving up to the point where we can't distinguish between healthy perseverance and unhealthy desperation. But there's a deeper psychological reason too. When we keep offering after being rejected, we're not really trying to win the other person over. We're trying to avoid facing a painful truth. The truth that we weren't chosen. The truth that we weren't enough. The truth that someone looked at what we had to offer and decided it wasn't what they wanted. And that hurts. Hurts our ego. Challenges our sense of self-worth. So instead of sitting with that pain and moving through it, we tell ourselves a story. They don't really mean it. They don't understand what they're rejecting. If I just try one more time, they'll see. They'll realize. They'll change their mind. But they won't. Because the problem was never that they didn't understand. The problem is that they did understand and they made their choice. The Victorian rule wasn't about being cold or unforgiving. It was about recognizing reality and responding to it with dignity. It was about understanding that when someone shows you who they are and what they value, you should believe them. The first rejection might be circumstance. The second rejection is a pattern. And if you offer a third time, you're not being rejected anymore. You're rejecting yourself. You're telling yourself that you're not worth the respect of having your offerings treated with care. You're agreeing with their assessment that what you have to offer isn't valuable enough to be accepted. Here's the thing the Victorians knew that we've forgotten. Dignity isn't something other people give you. Something you maintain for yourself. And every time you offer something to someone who has already despised it, you chip away at your own dignity. Not in their eyes, though that happens too. In your own eyes. You lose respect for yourself. You start to wonder why you're not enough. You start to believe that maybe you deserve to be treated this way. And that's when the real damage happens. Because once you've internalized the belief that you're not worth being treated with respect, you'll accept disrespect from everyone. Not just the person who rejected your initial offer, but everyone else in your life. You'll have trained yourself to accept crumbs and call it a feast. So what's the alternative? What do you do when someone rejects your offer? The first time you accept it gracefully. You don't make it awkward. You don't demand explanations. You simply acknowledge their decision and move on. If there's a legitimate reason and they come back to you, great. The door isn't closed. But you're not holding it open. You're not waiting on the threshold hoping they'll change their mind. You've moved on with your life. The second time, if it happens, you pay attention. This isn't coincidence anymore. This is information. This person is showing you, through their actions, that they don't value what you're offering. Maybe it's nothing personal. Maybe what you're offering genuinely isn't what they need or want. That's fine. Not everyone has to want what you have. But you need to recognize it and adjust accordingly. You don't offer again. You redirect that energy somewhere it will be appreciated. You find people, opportunities, relationships where your offer is met with enthusiasm rather than indifference or rejection. Because here's the truth the Victorians understood in their bones. Your time, your energy, your resources, your very self, these are finite. You only have so much to give. And every moment you spend offering to people who have shown you they don't want what you're offering is a moment you could be spending on people who do. It's a moment you could be investing in yourself, in your growth, in opportunities that will actually pan out. It's a moment you're wasting on trying to convince someone to value you instead of finding people who already do. This doesn't mean you never help people. Doesn't mean you never give second chances. It means you recognize the difference between someone who made a mistake and genuinely wants to make amends, and someone who is showing you through consistent behavior that they don't respect you or what you offer. It means you stop mistaking your own desperation for virtue. It means you develop enough self-respect to walk away from situations where you're not valued, even if walking away is painful, even if it means being alone for a while, even if it means admitting you were wrong about someone or something. The Victorians had their flaws. Many of them. Their society was rigid, often cruel, deeply unjust in countless ways. But on this particular point they were right. Never offer twice what has already been despised. Not because the other person doesn't deserve a second chance, but because you deserve better than to beg for one. You deserve to be chosen enthusiastically, not accepted reluctantly. You deserve to have your offerings met with appreciation, not indifference. And you deserve to value yourself enough to recognize when someone is telling you, through their actions, that you're not what they want. When that happens, the most powerful thing you can do is believe them, accept it, and redirect your energy toward people and opportunities that will value what you bring to the table. So take a moment and think about your own life. Where are you offering for the 3rd, 4th, 10th time? Where are you degrading yourself by refusing to accept someone's clear answer? What relationships, opportunities, situations are you clinging to despite all evidence that they're not serving you? The Victorian aristocrat who received 2 rejections and moved on with grace wasn't being cold. They were being wise. They understood that dignity once lost is nearly impossible to regain. And they valued their dignity more than they valued forcing someone to accept what they clearly didn't want. You can learn from them. You can stop offering twice. You can recognize rejection for what it is and respond with the kind of self-respect that says, I offered. You declined. I wish you well, but I'm moving on to people who will appreciate what I have to give. That's not cruelty. That's not coldness. That's wisdom. And it might just save you from years of unnecessary pain.